Hello everybody, Hardcore Champion here. Today I'm going to be reading to you a fanfiction. This is based on Invader Zim. Now, quick background. Background on the show's main release, I never really grew up with it, mainly because I never actually caught on to it. However, back when I found Nickelodeon Network, which I don't even think is something that's around anymore, that's where I found a lot of the reruns that they showed. And that's where I got most of my exposure to it. And I must say, it was a very good show. It was very creative, very weird, very strange, very funny, very inspiring in a lot of ways. It was a lot different from a lot of the other shows I had seen around that time, like SpongeBob and so. But I eventually found a following for it, which isn't as big as, say, the Brony community is. However, it is a pretty good following, as from what I've seen. Now, the fanfiction we're going to be reading to you today is something called Enemies Have Feelings Too. This is by Crimzination. I will post a link in the description if you'd like to read it for yourself, but if you wish to not do that, then you can listen to me. Okay, without further ado, let's begin. Dib sat in his usual seat in Miss Bitter's class, doodling in his blue notebook. He was drawing ghosts, vampires, and paranormal as much to be specific. He sighed and glanced up to see Miss Bitter's still echoing words of doom in the world and how it will implode on itself. Dib, however, knowing how much he knew about science, knew that the world wasn't going to end in some explosion, moon crashing into the ocean, or even a big earthquake. It was going to end by something even worse. The paranormal freak turned his big head towards the right side of the classroom to see the strange green boy. His chin was leaning on the top of his desk, and his frail arms falling over the desk in front of him. The bored look on his face was tinted with sadness and disappointment as the clock on the wall ticked louder. Zim felt him being watched and looked over to see the Dib human staring at him. Once again, he glared at him. Having no attention to deal with him, he turned his head back towards the front of the class and closed his eyelids. Dib became very confused at the look he gave him and leaned back into his seat, the dark clouds approaching in the sky as the sun gave it a yellow-orange color, making it very beautiful in this dirty planet called Earth. Zim glanced up in fear as he hears the sounds of rain approaching and whimpers silently. Dib, hearing the sound, turned his head once more to see the alien clutching his arms around his thing legs, rocking his body in fear. He frowned once more, and the ranting from Miss Bitter stood in a stop. "Go home now!" She points dramatically toward the door, and all the kids jumped out the window, and the door was being jammed with more students rushing to their lockers, retrieving what they needed, and returned to their home. Dib was the last to leave, and opened his green locker door. He took out his blue scarf around his thin neck, and grabbed his black umbrella, although he did have something else with him. Zim was staring at the light rain falling from the light clouds. Surely the rain would stop soon, right? He thought in his mind, and sat on the closet step furthest away from the deadly liquid. Footsteps were heard, and the boy turned his head to see Dib with a black umbrella, ready to be used and unfolded. Zim frowned. "Go on, laugh at me." Dib's eyes opened wide behind his round glasses and shook his head. "I don't think it's a time to laugh at this time now, Zim." He opened his umbrella and looked down at him. "Come on, we'll share one." Zim's eyes opened wide and narrowed his eyes down once more. "Zim needs no help from a human, especially you, my most awful enemy ever." As he yelled, he stood up and pointed a finger at his chest, poking him at every end of sentence. Dib just ignored his rants and grabbed the wrists that constantly and annoyingly poked him and dragged him into the rain. Zim squealed like a monkey while Dib rolled his eyes. "You're under my umbrella, space boy. You're not going to get wet anytime soon." Zim stood there and looked around and sighed in contempt at Dib's gesture. They walked a little bit down the road, and Dib sighed. "I almost forgot to tell you something." Dib stopped with the umbrella in his hand and used his free hand to grab his scarf and wrap it around Zim instead. Zim, being shocked as he was, stared at his enemy and frowned. "Is this some sort of trick?" Dib shook his head immediately. "Of course not." Zim was pleased, but snuggled his hands on the soft fabric. "Well, thank you, I suppose." Zim stood there with his eyes closed, and Dib smiled at him. Dib reached his hand into the trench coat pocket to bring out a dark violet wrapping paper with a black bow. He tapped his enemy's shoulders to get his attention, and as Zim turned his head, his eyes opened wide in surprise. "Happy birthday, Zim." Dib held out the present in his hand and stared at Zim and smiled. Soon later, Zim made a small smile and held out his two hands. This is the first time I've ever seen Zim smile. Zim carefully grabbed the gift and began to gently remove the black bow. The box was then opened to reveal a small green plush. Zim carefully placed his hand inside the box to see a small plush doll of himself. Zim's eyes opened wide and stared at it. The same green skin and uniform he always wore, but there were red orbs and two black stalks on the top of his green head. He removed his eyes off the gift and stared at Dib's smiling face, as a small tint of red was on his face. Zim blushed blue as he smiled with him. "Dib, human." Dib looked at Zim with a more listening look. "Yes, Zim?" Zim was approaching closer to Dib, and had that evil smirk on his face, with their nose nearly touching. Dib was worrying for more. "Zim," Dib tried taking a step back, but was stopped as a steel leg was holding him in place. Dib looked behind him to see the claw and panicked. As he turned his head back towards Zim, he was already close to the space between them, and Dib was staring at closed eyes. What is he doing?" Zim wrapped his arms around his neck and pushed against him more, forcing him to join in. Dib's eyes were falling eyelid and soon became closed and joined with his alien friend, wrapping his arms around his back. The passionate kiss they had was nothing they felt before. It was something different. The tingling sensation of feelings were put into this as they removed themselves for only a quick second before joining back in once more. They wanted this. They needed this. Zim wanted all of this to happen on this special day, never letting go of the one human who cared for him after all the days they fought. Even though they were enemies, Dib still cared for this alien. The lips locked together, hugging each other close, and soon they were moved with their blushes still exposed on their faces. They stared at each other for a bit and smiled. The rain around them stopped suddenly on call, and Dib removed the umbrella. Dib grabbed Zim's free hand and intertwined them. Zim snuggled his gift against his chest as he wrapped the scarf around both Dib and himself. They both had smiles on their faces and kept glancing at the ground with the blushes lightly on their face. "Hey, Dib." Dib turned his head with Zim facing him again. "You humans may call it cheesy, but I enjoyed my birthday for once. Thank you for cheering me up." The blush on Dib's face darkened and nodded. Zim made a small laugh, and they continued to walk down the street, puddles of water splashing under their feet. The end. And that was Enemies Have Feelings Too. And I'm going to be honest, when I was first recording this and we got to the Zim and Dib kissing part, I kind of broke out a character there, so I had to edit those parts out. But outside of this was actually a very interesting look on their friendship. I certainly didn't expect it to go a shipping route, but either way, it was, normal at least. I mean, they could have gone a lot worse. So that was my fanfiction reading. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all later. Hardcore Champion signing out.